Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And Shabbat Shalom to all those who are watching with us today. I have an important message today that's kind of continuing on the theme that we've been going over the last month or so, or a little longer than that, concerning becoming Philadelphians. Actually, we've been talking about this for almost a year now, but really getting into the nuts and bolts with the Philadelphia experiment. And the message today is called the mixed multitude. The mixed multitude. And you know, it's interesting that when you're looking at the Amish, as a template, the Amish and the Mennonites as a template for the Philadelphian, and as friendly, as kind, as loving as they are, they stay totally separated from other people. So I mean, they'll help, they'll serve, but they just have that line in the sand knowing who is part of their community and who is not part of their community. And today, in a multicultural world, to be a separatist like this, it's almost considered racism. That people look at it as some form of racism or evil, where really it is, as we're going to see today, it was the downfall of Israel, and actually it's the downfall of believers today, and you will never, ever, ever have a sanctified community if you have a mixed multitude in your mix. So let's start in Exodus 12 in verse 36. And this is when the Israelites are getting ready to leave, right? It's right after the Passover. And Yahweh gave favor to the people in the eyes of the Egyptians, and they granted their requests, and they plundered Egypt. And the sons of Israel traveled from Rameses to Succoth, the men being about 600,000 on foot, apart from little ones. And also a mixed multitude went out with them, and flocks and herds, and many, very many livestock. Also a mixed multitude went out with them. So here it is, we look at the Exodus for the spiritual lessons that we to get from it, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. We look at from historical aspect of time element, which is fine. But sometimes you don't really see the cultural aspect of what happened with the Exodus. Because remember, Moses, although he's a Hebrew and actually a Levite, we know that because of the decree went out by the Pharaoh to kill the babies, Moses is put in a basket and he's sent down the river, taken by Pharaoh's daughter, and then what happens? He's raised an Egyptian. So basically for 40 years of his life, he's raised as an Egyptian. He's an Egyptian prince. He learns everything in warfare and everything. And then what happens? He realizes that he's a Hebrew. He sees two of his brethren, actually sees one of his brothers being manipulated by an Egyptian. He kills the Egyptian. And then the next day, there's two Israelites that are fighting, and they said, hey, are you going to kill us like you killed that Egyptian? He gets scared and he leaves, he runs. And then he comes back 40 years later, and that's when he's basically taking the Israelites out. What I think a lot of people realize is the fact of, as an Egyptian that lived as an Egyptian for 40 years in the court of Pharaoh, Moses knew a lot of people. So when Moses comes back, there were people, even probably Egyptian military men that supported him, that said, hey, he's a good guy, he's an honest guy, we want to follow him. So what happens? When the time comes for the Israelites to leave, there's a certain amount of Egyptians that decide they want to follow Moses. They want to go. They want to be part of the mixed multitude. So we have the children of Yahweh on one end, the Israelites, right? What did Yahweh say before that in Exodus 3 or 4, where he says to tell Pharaoh, you would not let my firstborn go, Israel, I'm going to kill your firstborn. So you have the Israelites that are there, but then you also have the people that were supporting Moses, maybe, that were Moses people, that were Egyptians, that were part of the mixed multitude, maybe even part of his family with Pharaoh that was coming with that. So this is where I want to get at, but I really want to show you now that from the Exodus and also all throughout Israel's history, it was the mixed multitude that was the downfall of them. And it's very interesting because the mixed multitude will always dilute the congregation. And I say it's like if you took and I probably should have put it here, a glass of wine, and poured half of the wine out and put half water. You'll even see the color where maybe originally it was nice and dark and red, now it's going to be lighter. And now pour half of it out again and pour more water, and it'll be lighter. Now pour half of it out again and pour more water. And if you keep diluting that wine, in a short period of time, there'll be no wine left. It'll only be water. And it's the same way. Think of that wine, not as wine now, but think of it as the Holy Spirit. And every time you take a community of believers and you pour in the mixed multitude, you're diluting that community of believers. And the more you do it, you get to the point where the Spirit of Yahweh will not be present anymore within that community. Exodus 32. Now let's look at something that happens not that far after leaving Egypt, right? The golden calf incident. And let's look at this and see the cause of the golden calf incident. Exodus 32, starting in verse 1. And the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, and the people gathered to Aaron, and they said, "Rise up, make for us gods who may go before our face. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." And Aaron said to him, "Break off the rings of gold, which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people broke off the rings of gold in their ears, and they brought to Aaron. And he took them from their hand and formed it with an engraving tool, and he made it a casted calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." And Aaron saw, and he built an altar before it. And Aaron called and said, "A feast to Yahweh tomorrow." So here it is, the mixed multitude, right? And probably many of these people were Egyptians and not Israelites. I'm not saying none of the Israelites were involved. Of course they were, because they were coerced by the mixed multitude. But who's over here doing it? Who were the ones that were worshiping golden calves? It was Egyptians. So it's the Egyptians that are saying, "Hey, this Moses, he's gone, you know. You build for us a golden calf that we could worship." And then what is Aaron doing? He does it, and then he says, "A feast to Yahweh tomorrow." So he's calling the golden calf Yahweh. And they rose early in the morning, and they offered burnt offerings and brought near peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to make merry. And Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, "Come, go down, for your people, whom you caused to go up from Egypt, or corrupted," right? Why would Yahweh say that to him? Your people, right? Like I said, the Israelites are Yahweh's people. Who are Moses' people? The Egyptians. So this is part of the mixed multitude. He says, "They have quickly turned off from the way which I commanded them, and they have made for themselves a casted calf, and have bowed to it, and they sacrificed. And they said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt.'" An Israelite would never say, "These are your gods, O Israel," because they are Israel. The Egyptians would say to the Israelites, "These are your gods, O Israel." So clearly, if you really look into this, we see who are the culprits in the golden calf. The culprits are the mixed multitude. As we're going to see every single time almost that there was problems, whether it was coming out of Egypt or when the nation of Israel was a country, almost all the time it was the mixed multitude that got them in trouble. Like I said, a non-Israelite would never refer to Israel as Israel. The mixed multitude enticed, right? They tempted Israel, and they brought doubt against Moses because they were unconverted, right? Where is Moses? You think that the people that had faith would worry that Moses was up in the mountain? Of course not. And it's the same today. Who are the people that bring doubt into the congregation? The mixed multitude. The people who don't have faith, the people who don't believe. And they always go back to the filth of the world as they have no faith. They always go by the five senses. You know, they go by their sight, they go by their hearing, they go by their taste, their touch, their smell. So the mixed multitude does not walk by faith. They walk by the senses. Numbers 25, let's look again. Numbers 25, where a horrible sin is happening here. Many people are going to die. And this is right after Balaam, right? Balaam also part of the mixed multitude. Part of the ones trying to curse Israel. But Yahweh wouldn't let him. And let's start. Numbers 25. And Israel lived in Shittim, and the people began to fornicate with the daughters of Moab. So again, a mixed multitude. And they called the people to the sacrifices of their Elohims. This is what they're doing. The Moabites are calling the Israelites to their sacrifices. And the people ate and bowed themselves to the Elohims of Moab. And Israel was joined to Baal Peor, and the anger of Yahweh burned against Israel. Again, going with a mixed multitude. And Yahweh said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up to Yahweh before the sun, that the fierce anger of Yahweh may be turned from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, each one of you kill his men, those who joined to Baal Peor. And behold, a man of the sons of Israel came and brought into his brothers a woman of Midian, before the eyes of Moses and before the eyes of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, groaning at the door of the tent of meeting. And Phineas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw. And he rose from amidst the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. And he went in after the man of Israel into the tent room. And he pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the sons of Israel. And those that died by the plague were 24,000, right? 24,000 people died because of the enticement of the mixed multitude. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Phineas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned my wrath away from the sons of Israel while he was zealous for my sake among them, so I did not consume the sons of Israel my jealousy. Therefore, say, behold, I give to him my covenant of peace. So what was his reward for going in and killing two people? He got the covenant of peace, the covenant of shalom. Because you want to know something? You will never have peace when the mixed multitude is there. You will always have tension, and you always have chaos, and you'll always have a murmuring. You will never have peace with the mixed multitude. So here it is. His reward for killing someone is actually getting the covenant of shalom. And it said to him and to his seed after him the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his Elohim and atoned for the sons of Israel. And then they give the name of the man and the woman who were there. And then we drop down to verse 16. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, vex the Midianites, and you shall strike them. For they are vexers to you, because of the wiles with which they have beguiled you, in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a ruler of Midian, their sister, who was struck in the day of the plague, because of the matter of Peor. So we see here very, very interesting that Yahweh very clearly says they're vexers. The mixed multitude were always going to be vexers. But you know what the mixed multitude do? They play with your emotions. They play with the emotions because they know that Satan is very easily to deceive people with emotions. So sometimes they try to act like they're in need. Sometimes they try to play on your heart, your good heart as a believer, but we can't fall for it. And like I said, Phineas was rewarded the covenant of peace for destroying the mixed multitude. Let's go to Numbers 11. Numbers 11 and verse 1. And the people were evil as those complaining in the ears of Yahweh. And Yahweh heard, and his anger glowed, and the fire of Yahweh burned among them and devoured the extreme edge of the camp. In verse 6. And now, what are they saying? Now our soul withers. There is nothing except this manna before our eyes. And the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like the look of belly and present gum. So when we see these people that are yearning for the leeks and the onions of Egypt, logically think to yourself, are these Israelites who were slaves, who basically were getting minimal food? Of course not. Are Israelites going to complain about manna? Some of them would, because they're being coerced by the mixed multitude. But the majority of people that are complaining to Yahweh because they don't have meat, because they don't have food, they're not slaves of the Israelite slaves. These are the people of Egypt that were living good lives there. And now they see the plagues of Egypt, and what are they doing? They're running from those plagues of Egypt, thinking that their lives will be better with Moses. And now in the wilderness, when they're having trials, what are they doing? They're coercing the Israelites, the mixed multitude, to complain, to murmur. And everybody is suffering from it. Hosea, verse 7. Let's go to the book of Hosea now. And we know, again, the tribes of Israel, the northern tribes called Ephraim, right? They went into captivity 721, 718 BC. Roughly 120, 130 years later is when Judah goes into captivity under the Babylonians. But why? What was the biggest sin of Ephraim, the northern tribes of Israel? Why did they go into captivity? Let's take a look in Hosea, the 7th chapter. He says, when I would have healed Israel, Then the iniquity of Ephraim was uncovered, and the wickedness of Samaria. For they have worked falsehood, and a thief comes, a troop of robbers plunders outside. And they do not say within their hearts that I remember all their evil. Now their own doings have hemmed them in. They are before my face. They make the king glad with their evil, and the rulers with their lies. They are all adulterers, like an oven heated by the baker. He ceases from stirring, from kneading the dough until it is leavened. In the day of our king, the rulers have sickened themselves with the heat of wine. He stretches out his hand with scorners. For they have brought their heart near like an oven, while they lie in wait. Their baker sleeps all night. In the morning it burns like a flaming fire. They are all hot as an oven, and devour their judges. All their kings have fallen. Not one among them calls to me. So now he's telling the decrepit state of Ephraim. Now he's going to tell us why. Why are they like this? Verse 8. Ephraim mixed himself among the peoples. Ephraim mixed himself among the people. Ephraim became in this decrepit state because he did not stay sanctified. They didn't stay like the Amish. They didn't stay separated from the world, right? They didn't stay segregated. Ephraim is a cake half turned. A cake half turned. If you ever baked, you know. What does that mean? It means it's burned on the bottom and it's not cooked on the top. It's good for nothing. It's a cake half turned. Strangers have eaten up his strength, yet he does not know. Yea, gray hairs are sprinkled here and there in him, and he does not know. And the pride of Israel testifies to his face. And they do not return to Yahweh their Elohim, nor seek him in this. Ephraim also is like a silly dove without heart. They call to Egypt. They go to Assyria, right? They're going to the mixed multitude. They're not looking to Yahweh. When they go, I will spread my net over them. I will bring them down like birds of the heaven. I will chastise them as a report of their congregation. Woe to them, for they have fled from me. Ruin to them, for they have transgressed against me. Though I would redeem them, yet they have spoken lies against me. And they have not cried to me with their heart when they howled on their beds. They gather themselves for grain and wine, they turn against me. Though I bound, I make their arms strong, yet they think evil against me. They return, but not to the Most High. They are like a treacherous bow. Their rulers shall fall by the sword from the rage of the tongue. They shall be the scorn in the land of Egypt. So Yahweh's saying, as they go to these other lands, to Egypt, to Assyria, and all the places where Ephraim's going to go, they ain't going to have it good. Because they're not looking to Yahweh, they're looking toward the mixed multitude, they're looking toward their neighbors, they're not looking inward toward Yahweh. And look what happens from here. At least when Judah went into captivity, Judah stayed separate from the places they went to. And after 2,520 years, whether you go to Iran, you go to Egypt, you go to Iraq, you go to Syria, Lebanon, the Jews were still living in their own areas, and Yahweh was able to bring them home. Ephraim never did that. Ephraim assimilated with the mixed multitude, and they lost their whole identity. They lost who they are. And that's why today, as Ephraimites, we're not back in the land yet. Because there hasn't been that great repentance that has come yet for Yahweh to bring his people back. And there's still, today, as we're going to see, the congregation is still being vexed by the mixed multitude. Let's go to the book of Ezra, and let's see this again. So what happens, right? Israel winds up, even Judah now, 573 BC, Judah goes into captivity in Babylon because they follow the sins of the northern tribes of Israel, the sins of Ephraim. There's 70 years in Egypt, there's 70 years in Babylon, there's 70 years outside the land, and now Yahweh is going to bring the people back after 70 years. They're going to rebuild the temple of Yahweh, the sanctuary of Yahweh, and yet they're going to make the same mistake. And Ezra is just going to be cut to his heart when he sees they're once again mixing with the mixed multitude. So let's go to Ezra 9, starting in verse 1. Ezra 9, starting in verse 1. At the end of these things, the leaders came near to me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands. As to their abominations, even the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken from their daughters for themselves and for their sons. For the holy seed have mixed themselves with the people of the lands. Yes, the hands of the leaders and the overseers have been foremost in this treachery. And when I heard this thing, I tore my garments and my robe, and pulled the hair of my head and my beard, and sat down stunned. So Ezra isn't just a little bit upset at this. He's literally, there's an expression, oh, you got me so frustrated, I'm pulling out my hair. He's literally pulling out the hair of his head and the hair of his beard because he's in mourning. He's so upset about this, of the treachery, like he says. Then were gathered to me everyone who trembled at the words of the Elohim of Israel because of the treachery of the exiles. And I remained stunned until the evening sacrifice. And at the evening offering, I rose up from my fasting and with my garment and my robe torn. I even fell on my knees and spread out my hands to Yahweh my Elohim. Right, so now he's on his hands and knees. He's face down. He's just pleading out to Yahweh. And I said, oh my Elohim, I am ashamed and wounded to lift up my face to you, oh my Elohim. For our iniquities have increased over our head, and our guiltiness has grown to the heavens. Since the days of our fathers we have been in great guilt until this day. And as for iniquities, we, our kings, our priests, have been delivered into the hand of the kings of the land, to the sword, to the captivity, to plunder, and to shame of faces to this day. And now for a little time grace has been shown from Yahweh our Elohim to leave us a remnant to escape, and to give us a nail in his holy place, so that our Elohim may enlighten our eyes and give us a little reviving in our bondage. And this is almost like we could say today, think about this scripture. This is exactly what Yahweh's allowing. He's allowing us as Ephraimites this little bit of light, right? A little grace given to us and to the remnant to escape the nail in the holy place, so that our Elohim may enlighten our eyes and give us a little reviving in our bondage. He's given us, even though Ephraim hasn't come back to the land yet, he's given us a foothold in the land of Israel. We've been there the last 20 years. We're keeping the feast. We're doing the programs. Yahweh has actually given us grace and has even blessed the land of Israel because of our ministry that we're doing there. For we were slaves, but our Elohim has not left us in bondage, but has given mercy to us in the sight of the kings of Persia, to give us a reviving, to raise up the house of our Elohim and to make stand its ruins, and to give us a wall in Judah and in Jerusalem. And now our Elohim, what shall we say for this? For we have forsaken your commandments, which you have commanded by your servants the prophets, saying, the land into which you go to possess, it is unclean land with the impurity of the people of the lands, with their abominations with which they have filled it, from mouth to mouth with their uncleanness. And now do not give your daughters to their sons, and do not take their daughters to your sons, or seek their peace or their wealth forever, so that you may be strong and eat the good of the land, and leave it as an inheritance for your sons forever. We're to stay separate. We're to stay sanctified from the people of the land. And after all that has come on us for our evil deeds and for our great guilt, since you, our Elohim, have held back the rod of our iniquities, and have given us such an escape as this, shall we again turn back to break your commandments and intermarry with the people of these abominations? Would you not be angry with us until you've destroyed us, until there is no remnant or survivor? O Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, you are righteous, for we are left as a survivor, as it is this day. Behold, we are before you in our guilt, for none is able to stand before you of this. So wow, this is like a vile, great sin that's going on. Then let's read on in chapter 10. And he says, well, Ezra was praying and making his confession, weeping and casting himself down before the house of the Elohim. A very great congregation of men and women and children gathered to him out of Israel. For the people wept with a great weeping. They started to see what they're doing wrong. And Shechaniah the son of Yehiel and the sons of Elam answered and said to Ezra, we have sinned against our Elohim, and we have dwelt with foreign women from the people of the land. Yet now there is hope in Israel concerning this thing. And now let us cut a covenant with our Elohim to put away and to cause to leave all the women and those born of them according to the counsel of Yahweh, and those who tremble at the commandment of our Elohim. And let it be done according to the Torah. Rise up, for the matter is on you, and we will be with you. Be strong and act. Then Ezra rose up and made the chief priests, the Levites, and all Israel to swear that they would do according to the word, and they swore. Then Ezra rose up from before the house of the Elohim and went into the room of Yohanan, the son of Eliashib. And he went there, and he did not eat food, nor did he drink, for he mourned for the transgression of the exiles. And they passed a call throughout Judah and Jerusalem to all the sons of the exiles to assemble at Jerusalem, and that whoever would not come within 3 days according to the counsel of the leaders and the elders, all his property would be forfeited, and he would be excluded from the congregation of the exiles. Then all the men of Judah and Benjamin gathered to Jerusalem within 3 days. It was the 9th month, on the 20th of the month, and all the people sat in the plaza of the house of the Elohim, trembling because of the matter and because of the heavy rain. And Ezra the priest stood up and said to him, "You have trespassed and have dwelt with foreign women to increase the guilt of Israel. And now make confession to Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, and do his will. And separate yourself from the peoples of the land and from the foreign women." Then all the congregation answered and said with a loud voice, "Right, according to your word, it is on us to do." So here we are, 2,000 years later, and we're in the same situation. We're realizing the Philadelphia experiment, the people of Yahweh, not just marrying foreign women, that's one thing, but like he says here, the people of Yahweh have been too much intertwined with the people of the world. The people of Yahweh have not stayed segregated as the Amish and the Mennonites are, and it's a great sin before Yahweh. And if we ever want to go back to the promised land, if we want to be the 144,000 part of the tribes that go back there, we got to separate ourselves from the mixed multitude. It's very clear. Let's go to Nehemiah 13. Nehemiah 13, we'll see more of this, because this was a grave, grave sin in Yahweh's eyes. Nehemiah 13, starting in verse 1. On that day they read in the book of Moses in the ears of the people, and it was found written in that the Amorite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of the Elohim forever, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. But our Elohim turned the curse to a blessing. And it happened when they had heard the Torah, they separated all the mixed multitude from Israel. So I'm praying that we need to do the same. In our kibbutzes, in our communities, there should not be a mixed multitude in the camp. We talked about that many, many times. We need to keep our camps sanctified. Let's drop down to verse 15. It says, "And in those days I saw in Judah ones treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and loading donkeys and wine and grapes and figs and all burdens which they brought to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them on that day they sold food. Men of Taberah also lived in it, who brought fish and wares and were selling on the Sabbath to the sons of Judah, even in Jerusalem." So this is my point, and I say this. People ask sometimes, can you get married on the Sabbath day? And I say there's nothing against Scripture for two believers to take their vows on the Sabbath day. But are you having a big reception where there's going to be a lot of work to do on the Sabbath day? Then it's better to wait till after the Sabbath to do it. But to go to someone else's wedding on the Sabbath day who's not a believer, you're taking all your sanctification away. Every single time on the Sabbath there's one unconverted person in your midst, you're taking a percentage of your sanctification away. And we see it here because the people that are not Sabbath keepers, why are they going to be being holy to Yahweh? Why are they going to be sanctifying the Sabbath? And that's what we're seeing here. There's a mixed multitude being in Jerusalem. And these people are not only not keeping the Sabbath themselves, they're enticing the Jews, the people of Yahweh, to also be breaking Shabbat. And then verse 17. And this is Nehemiah's answer. "And I contended with the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this evil thing that you do, defiling the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do this, and did not our Elohim bring all this evil on us and on the city? Yet you were adding more wrath on Israel by defiling the Sabbath. And it happened when the gates of Jerusalem began to be shaded as the sun was setting, just before the Sabbath began, I commanded that the gate should be shut and commanded that they should not be opened until after the Sabbath. And I stationed some of my servants at the gate so that there should be no merchandise brought in on the Sabbath day," right? He literally had to close the gates and guard it. "And the merchants and the sellers of the wares stayed the night outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them and said, why are you staying around the wall? If you do it again, I will send a hand against you." From that time they did not come on the Sabbath. So what did Nehemiah do? He cut the mixed multitude off. He put them outside the gate. He closed the gate. They stayed there a bit, and then he said, "You come again, I'm going to put a hand to you." And they didn't come after that. "And I said to the Levites that they should be cleansing themselves, and they should be guarding the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. O my Elohim, remember me for this, and spare me according to the greatness of your mercy." And in those days I also saw Jews who dwelt with women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, again a mixed multitude. And their children spoke half in the speech of Ashdod, and to them there was no respecting to speak the Jewish language, but according to the language of each people. And I contended with them and put a curse on them, and struck some of them, and I plucked their hair. And I made them swear by the name of Elohim, saying, you shall not give your daughter to their sons, nor take their daughters to your sons for yourself. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved by his Elohim. And Elohim made him king over Israel, but women from other lands caused even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you to do this great evil, to sin against our Elohim in living with foreign women? So we see right here that it's very, very clear that we are not to mix with non-believers, So nothing changes in the new covenant. A matter of fact, in the new covenant, it's even stronger. But it's not just a suggestion. It is a grave sin before Yahweh. And it is mixing his royal seed, his holiness. It's mixing with a mixed multitude, with pagan people, with people that are non-believers, which is against them. 1 Corinthians 10. Now let's start to look how all these things, that was the very downfall of Israel, how it plays in the Brit Hadashah, the new covenant. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 5. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 5. And who is he talking about? The Israelites. He's talking about the Israelites in the wilderness, and look what he says. Yet Elohim was not pleased with most of them, for they were scattered in the deserted place. But these things became examples for us, so that we may not be lusting after evil, even as some of those lusted. So what happens here? All these things he says are examples for us today. Everything that I'm reading about the mistakes they made being with the mixed multitude. Let's drop down to verse 10. Neither should you murmur as some of them murmured and perished by the hand of the destroyer. And all these things happened to those as examples, as it was written for our warning, on whom the ends of the age have come. So that he that thinks he stand, let him be careful that he not fall. And all the things he talks about here, fornication, idolatry, all of it was enticed by the mixed multitude. Almost every single sin that he's talking about here is enticed by the mixed multitude. Drop down to verse 14. He says, on account of this, keep away from idolatry, my beloved. I speak as to prudent ones. You judge what I say. The cup of blessing, right? The very cup that we take at Passover, that we bless, is it not partaking of the blood of Messiah? The cup which we break is not a partaking of the body of Messiah. The bread which we break, is it not a partaking of the body of Messiah? For just as the loaf of bread is one, for we are all one body, for we partake of the one loaf. Look at Israel, whose observances is according to flesh. Are not those eating the sacrifices partaking of the altar? What then shall I say? That an idol is anything, or an idol is the sacrifice is anything? No. But the things the pagans sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to Yahweh. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the master, right? You cannot take Passover and a cup of demons and have Christmas celebrations, Easter celebrations. You cannot partake in the table of the master and the table of demons. And how many people today, including some believers, will go to their family's house on Christmas? It's only a meal. It's just a meal, right? And partake of these evil things with them. Or do we provoke our master to jealousy? Are we stronger than he is? So the key to the matter is the mixed multitude will always cause compromise, right? Christmas, birthdays, Sabbath day, whatever it is, the mixed multitude is the one that's causing compromise. Because in the camp of Yahweh, there's safety. We talked about this when we were talking about the cities of refuge. In the camp of Yahweh, there is safety. Outside of that camp, you have the mixed multitude, and that's why we can't let the mixed multitude into the camp of Yahweh. 2 Corinthians 6:14, it even gets more specific. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not unite in marriage with unbelievers, for what partnership does righteousness have with lawlessness, and what fellowship does light have with darkness? It's very, very clear. And what agreement does the Messiah have with Satan, or what part does a believer have with an unbeliever? It is very, very clear, as we just saw over and over and over again in the Tanakh and in the Torah, that a believer is not to marry a non-believer. You know, it's a different situation if you come in and there's one converted and one not. That's not what I'm talking about. But a believer, a believer coming in who's or getting baptized, they are not to marry. It is a sin to marry a non-believer, as we're seeing here. And I can tell you that in all my years as a pastor, the worst situations I've had to counsel in the congregation is with a non-believing spouse. Doesn't matter if it's a male or a female, makes no difference. They're both bad situations. Sometimes I've seen it worse, where the male was the converted one, and the unconverted one was the wife. Made it really, really hard on the converted spouse, and sometimes the other way around. But both ways, the worst situations I've seen as a pastor is when you're dealing with an unconverted spouse. And like it says here, what agreement does Messiah have with Satan? Right? Or what part does a believer have with an unbeliever? And what harmony does the sanctuary of Elohim have with idols? For you are the sanctuary of the living Elohim, even as it is said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their Elohim, and they will be my people. Because of this, come out from among them and be separated, says Yahweh, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. And I will be a father to you, and you will be sons and daughters to me, says Yahweh Almighty. And then chapter 7, then having these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of Elohim. So this is not a suggestion, and this is not just with marriage, like I said. It's about keeping our camp clean. It's about keeping our camp clean from the mixed multitude. Yahweh's congregation is not holy enough. We're not kadosh enough because of our mixture of relationships with the mixed multitude of the world, right? And today, wow, you're looking in the year we're living in 2018, with a million people in the Messianic movement, even many sacred name believers and people that use the name Yahweh or Laodiceans. You have all the splits from all the different churches. I mean, it's so chaotic that if ever there was a time to stay away from the mixed multitude, it's now. Because you look in the Bible, very clear, there's the wheat and the chaff, there's the sheep and the goats. And at least half the people claiming to be believers are none other than the mixed multitude. So this is not only just pagans. This is not only just people that are non-religious. This is people that claim to be believers that are actually part of the mixed multitude. The same as the people that left Egypt with Moses. They claimed to be part of the house of Israel, and yet they were really part of the mixed multitude. 2 Peter 2 and verse 9, we'll see this. Because some of these people even come in our midst. They visit the congregation. They come to the feast. And yet, they're not part of the camp of Yahweh. They're part of the mixed multitude. 2 Peter 2, starting in verse 9. 2 Peter 2 and verse 9. But Yahweh knows to rescue the righteous out of temptation, and to keep the unjust to be punished at the judgment day. And especially he will punish those who follow after the filthy lusts of the flesh, and have no respect for authority. So the mixed multitude, that's the problem. They don't believe in judicial order. They don't believe in leadership. They don't believe in any of these things. They have no respect for authority. They're self-willed, they're arrogant, and they do not tremble when they blaspheme. Where cherubs, being greater in strength and power, do not bring against them the condemnation of blaspheming. But these men, like the dumb beasts, which by nature are for slaughter and destruction, speak evil of the things that they do not understand, and will utterly perish in their own corruption, right? So they were always, just like the mixed multitude talked against Moses when he was up getting the Ten Commandments, this mixed multitude will talk against leadership. They'll say, it's controlling spirit, we're all equal, we're all priests. The same as that happened to the Israelites. And they have no respect for the authority and the leadership that Yahweh ordained, not man. And they will utter in their own corruption. Being about to receive the wages of unrighteousness, as they consider it a delightful thing to revel in the daytime. They are spots and blemishes among you, and sport themselves with their own pleasures, feasting along you in idleness. Some of them come to the feast, they shake your hand, and then they're going all behind your back trying to get people against you. Having eyes full of adultery and never ceasing from sin, seducing unsettled souls, having a heart being filled with covetous, they are cursed children. And having forsaken the straight path, they have gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But who was rebuked for his own transgression, the dumb donkeys, speaking in a man's voice, held back the folly of the prophet. These are springs without water, right? They come and they act as brethren, but they're empty springs. Clouds being driven by a storm, for whom the blackness of darkness has been kept forever. For while they speak astonishing words of vanity, they seduce with obscene lusts of the flesh them who have almost abandoned these that walk in error, right? So brethren that almost came out of this evil, way of the world and the different things, they've almost overcome, and they meet the mixed multitude, and the mixed multitude pulls them right back to where they were. While promising to them freedom, they themselves being slaves of corruption, for man is overcome by whatever it is that enslaves him. And most of the mixed multitude are all kinds of hooked up in all kinds of different sins. They're not telling this when they're trying to entice brethren away from the truth, but they have all kinds of problems themselves, and they're only out from self-motivation. It says, for if when they have escaped the pollutions of the world by the knowledge of our Master and Redeemer, Yeshua the Messiah, they become again entangled in the very same things and are overcome by them, their later end is worse than the beginning. For it is better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having recognized it to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. But the word of the true proverb has come to them, the dog returns to his own vomit, also the sow that was washed to wallowing in the mud. So unfortunately, this is a sad reality, but just like we saw it with the Israelites back in the book of Exodus, is the same we see today. So we have to be careful of the mixed multitude. And unfortunately, sometimes it can even come from leadership. Acts 20 and verse 17. Acts 20 and verse 17. Because, like they say, you can maybe trick me, and you can maybe even trick yourself, but you can't trick Yahweh. And sometimes there are people, and sometimes people just change also, but sometimes people come in with deceptive motives, looking just to get ordained or looking to get it in leadership or power. In Church of God, we used to call them super deacons. They'd come in for years sometimes. They would brown nose. They would do anything. They'd serve. They'd do whatever. And then you make them an usher. Give them the little usher badge. And the next thing you know, they're like stormtroopers. Now all of a sudden that they have this little bit of authority, they're trying to tell everybody what to do. Acts 20 and verse 17. And this is the Apostle Paul. It says, in sending to Ephesus from Miletus, he called for the elders of the congregation. So these now are the elders, the leaders of the congregation. Listen what the Apostle Paul says. He's been with them for a while, for several years, and now he's telling them something right before he's ready to go. And he says in verse 25, and now I know that you will see my face no more, all of you among whom I have travailed and preached the kingdom of Yahweh. Because of this I testify to you on this day that I am pure from the blood of all. For I did not keep back from declaring to you all the counsel of Elohim. Then take heed to yourself and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit placed you as overseers, to shepherd the congregation of Yahweh, which he purchased through his own blood. For I know this, that after my departure, grievous wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And out of you yourself, out of these elders, will rise up men speaking perverted things, in order to draw away the disciples after themselves. Because of this, watch, remembering I did not cease admonishing each one with tears night and day for 3 years. And he's saying, out of their own people. And it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen sometimes. That there's somebody that's even in leadership that's part of the mixed multitude. And sometimes they think that they can leave Yeshua's congregation, start their own congregation, the congregation of whoever, Bill, the congregation of Joe, the congregation of, they could start their own congregation, and they hoodwink some people to follow with it. But, there is judicial order in Scripture, and like I said, there's one nation of Israel, and if somebody in the days of the kings didn't like the king, he couldn't simply leave and start Little Israel, or Israel 2, or start something else. The same way a police officer. A police officer has a lot of authority, but can a police officer leave the police force and start his own force? Can he just say, okay, now I'm leaving the police force in this city because whatever, I don't like the way they're doing things, I'm going to start my own police force? No, of course it doesn't work that way. The same way that somebody that could have hoodwinked the leadership, or maybe even had a right attitude when they started, once they leave the ordained eldership that Yahweh has put there, and they rebelliously, go out on their own, they're no longer an elder in the congregation, and they're certainly not an elder before Yahweh. And this is the reason why the Amish, who are filled with love and mercy and compassion, even the people that killed their children, that they were filled with love, mercy, and compassion and forgiveness. This is why Amish shun people that leave their community. They do it for two reasons. Number one, because they love the person who's leaving. And if you don't shun that person, and if you show them that you could have the same relationship with them outside the congregation as inside the congregation, they're never going to repent and come back. But the second thing is they know how dangerous these people are that leave the congregation, because they're self-serving and they're going to try to pull other people out of the congregation. So they're shunning them for the love of the brethren and the love of that person. But it is a biblical way of doing it. The Bible tells us that there's people that rebel, there's people that were bringing false doctrine, there's people that are put out of the congregation, that they should be shunned. And we see it here. 1 John 2 and verse 15. 1 John 2 and verse 15. It says, "Do not love the world nor the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away in its lust, but the one doing the will of Yahweh abides forever." So the mixed multitude, they don't have the love of Yahweh, they have the love of the world. And when does the mixed multitude want to come with the remnant congregation? When there's a problem. When there's a problem. I remember when 9/11 happened back in 2001, how many people then were looking to change? A matter of fact, they said the week after 9/11, there were more people who went to church than any other time in the history of recorded records. And within 1 month, there was less people than before 9/11. So that's the way it is. The mixed multitude are looking to save their own skin. And yes, when trouble comes and when the fires and the earthquakes and all these troubles coming in the world, that's when the mixed multitude wants to join the remnant, only looking to save their skin and save their flesh. Because the problem with the mixed multitude is they love the ways of the world. But yet they're going to try to bring those ways into the congregation. But look what he says now about the people who leave the congregation. Are they part of the remnant? Or are they part of the mixed multitude? Little children, it is the last hour, and as you heard that the anti-Messiah is coming, even now many anti-Messiahs have risen up, from which you know it is the last hour. Anti-Messiah does not mean against Messiah, it means in the place of Messiah. And people that leave the congregation and start their own congregation, they're called anti-Messiah. They're taking the place of Yeshua and Yeshua's leaders and starting their own. And why are they doing it? Because they love the ways of the world. They can't follow judicial order. And look what it says in verse 19. "They went out from us because they are not of us. If they were of us, they would have remained with us. But they left so that it might be revealed that they are not of us. And you have an anointing from the Holy One, and you know all things." Right? And then verse 26. "I wrote these things to you concerning the ones leading you astray." So these people that are part of the mixed multitude, if they were really part of the remnant, they would still be in the congregation. What would take you out of Yahweh's congregation? What would take you out of Yahweh's congregation? Nothing should. It doesn't matter whether there's good leadership or bad leadership. It's Yahweh's congregation. It doesn't matter if you believe in a doctrine or you don't believe in a doctrine. It's Yahweh's congregation. The only thing that pulls somebody out is either their own pride and self-righteousness or their worldliness, one or the other, that they can't stay in it. But it's very clear. These are not the words of John. These are the words of the Apostle John under inspiration of the Holy Spirit and part of our New Testament that clearly says if they were part of us, they'd still be with us. It's that simple. The fact that they leave and go on their own means they're part of the mixed multitude. They're not part of the remnant. Very, very clear. Matthew 6 and verse 21. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Drop down to verse 24. "No one is able to serve two masters. You'll either hate the one and love the other, or you'll cleave to the one and despise the other. You're not able to serve Yahweh in wealth, or Yahweh in mammon, or Yahweh in anything. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And that's why, like I said, a police officer that wears a uniform that protects the people, it doesn't matter if he doesn't like his sergeant. It doesn't matter if there's something going on down in the police station he doesn't like. He can't leave and start his own police station. He has zero authority from anybody to do that. And yet, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's that simple. And the mixed multitude, their heart is with the five senses. Their heart is with the world. It's not with Yahweh. 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be led astray. Bad companionships ruin good habits. And this is one of the most important scriptures that you better learn and memorize in the days we're living in. Because like I said before, it was very easy. If you were part of Yahweh's remnant congregation, chances are you don't have too many connections with Catholics and Protestants and, Baptists or whatever. But today, with the evangelical movement and the messianic movement and all of these other movements that are coming in the Laodicean era, the lines have been so blurred that unfortunately, people that are supposed to be covenant people will be spending more time and have more friendships and relationships with people that are part of the messianic movement than with the people of Yahweh. And then what happens? Either, they start changing their beliefs. I've seen people that were good, honest Sabbath keepers for 20 and 30 years that fell into the lunar Sabbath. People now, even with the flat earth, people that are good, honest people and good, honest brethren that are believing in the flat earth. I mean, can you imagine? Keep walking then. Keep walking until you fall off. Then I'll believe in the flat earth. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And scientifically, there's about 100 different ways that you could know that the earth is not flat. Just as you're going in the waters and you're seeing always the curvature of the earth, the way it goes. Sunset time. The fact that it's different everywhere, but that's for another topic. The point of it is bad communications ruin good habits. There's not a person that comes up to me with the flat earth that just thought about it himself. No. They're under false internet sites or they're meeting with somebody who is of the mixed multitude and they're being deceived. And you have to sanctify yourself. Because don't just think of yourself. Think of your wife, your husband, your children. Think of the other brethren, right? It is a selfish, evil thing to be surfing the internet into evil websites, perverting your mind, and then coming around the true remnant of Yahweh and bringing that evil perversion in there. And it's never going to turn into something good. Absolutely ever. Because you want to know something? Over the years, many people have said to me, and a lot of them were young, well, I believe this, I'm fervent, I'm on fire, I'm just going to go back to my friends or my family or whoever, and I'm going to witness to them. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll separate. And what's happened in almost every case? They go back and they go back to the world. I've never even heard of one case where somebody just tries to go back to his friends, his family, or his best friends, or even his spouse, and tries to forcefully convert them where it ever worked. It's always the other way. That person winds up falling away, unfortunately. Ephesians 5 and verse 3, because we have a very strict standard in the congregation that we should be following as far as our conduct, the people we're associating with, and the people that we are refraining from. Because again, the people you're with are the people you're going to become like. It's that simple. Ephesians 5 and verse 3. But let not fornication and all uncleanness and greediness be named among you as is fitting for saints. Also cursing and foolish talking or witty insults, none of which are necessary, but rather the giving of thanks. So we're not supposed to be, as brethren, cutting each other's smart aleck remarks. No, giving of thanks. For you should know this, that anyone guilty of fornication or unclean person or covetous one who is an idolater has no inheritance in the kingdom of Messiah and Elohim. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for through these things the wrath of Yahweh comes on the sons of disobedience. And just think about when you hear these people, the mixed multitude, come to you and try to bring gossip or try to bring a false narrative or something against the Sabbath or whatever it is. Does it ever make you feel good? Do you ever leave a conversation like that feeling uplifted? No. You leave with feeling just this pit in your stomach and doubt and questioning. And that's why the best thing to do is cut it off before it even starts. Bad communications ruin good habits. You want to make sure you're not even giving the opportunity. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for through these things come the wrath of Yahweh comes on the sons of disobedience. Do not become partakers with them. For you then were in darkness, but now are in the light of the Master. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. And you must discern what is acceptable before a master, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather condemn them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things being done by them in secret. Their works are shameful, they're evil, Yahweh says. And as believers, we shouldn't even be listening and giving an ear to the mixed multitude. Sometimes people will say, and I've even, believe it or not, had Sabbath-keeping, baptized people that at times have even been going back to Sunday churches, and they say, I'm only doing it because my children need fellowship. Your children don't need that kind of fellowship, or putting their children in public school because my children need friends. They don't need that kind of friendship. 1 John 1, unless you want to lose your children, that's the easiest way to lose them. Bad communications ruin good habits. So put your children around unconverted, other evil children without the Spirit of Yahweh, and see how quick that they last. 1 John 1:1 says, what was from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we beheld, and what our hands touched, we declare to you is the word of life, talking about Messiah. And the life was revealed, and we have seen, and we bear witness, and we announce to you the everlasting life, which was with the Father, and was revealed to us. We announce to you what we have seen, and what we have heard, that you also may have fellowship with us. And truly our fellowship is with the Father and the Son, Yeshua Messiah. And we write these things to you that your joy may be full. So you want to know something? That's where fellowship starts, and that's where fellowship ends, because there is no true fellowship if somebody is not in the Father and the Son. Who wants fellowship like that? I would rather, like it says, better is a little in the house of the righteous than much in the house of the wicked. I would rather be by myself till the day I die than be around thousands of lukewarm, Laodicean, unconverted people that every week I'm going to come on Sabbath. They're only going to tell me more evil and more wickedness, and more false doctrine. So our fellowship is with the Father and the Son, and that's where it's got to start. But if you're around evil people, it's going to affect you. Proverbs, 1st chapter, and verse 10 and 11. My son, if sinners lure you, do not be willing. If they say, walk with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us secretly lurk for the innocent without cause. Drop down to verse 15. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they haste to shed blood. Drop down to verse 22. Until when will you love to be simple, you simple ones? And will scorners desire scorn for themselves? And will fools hate knowledge? Turn back at my warning. Behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. So this is the time, to go back to Yahweh with tears in your eyes and repent. Cut off these bad relationships. You don't need them. They're only hurting your life. Strengthen yourself with Yahweh and Yeshua. Spend more time in His Word, more time in prayer, more time in fasting, more time in meditation. You don't need more time with the mixed multitude. It's the mixed multitude that are the problem. The book of Haggai. The book of Haggai. Chapter 2, and starting in verse 11. The key is with the mixed multitude too. It doesn't always happen all at once. A lot of times it's little by little. It's little by little, but as those things start getting into your mind, like any other evil thing, you let that stuff in, it's very hard to get it out afterward. Haggai 2 and verse 11 says, So says Yahweh of hosts, now ask the priest the Torah, saying, Behold, one bears holy flesh in the wing of his garment, and touches his wing to the bread, or boiled food, or wine, or oil, or any food, will it become holy? And the priest answered and said, No. And Haggai said, If the unclean of body touches these, will it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, It is unclean. And Haggai answered and said, So is this people, and so is this nation before me, declares Yahweh, and so is every work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean. So very, very clearly, the priest has something that's sanctified, holy, in his napkin, in his skirt, whatever, and he comes to something that's unholy. Is that holy? Going to make that holy? No. But if he has something that's holy in his apron, and he comes to somebody that's unholy, and the holy touches the unholy, will the holy become defiled? He says yes. And he says, so is this people, and so is this whole nation before me. Are we getting it? Are we getting it? Why the Amish and why the Mennonites and these groups stay separated from the world? Because we're living in, not just Babylon is completely defiled, but we're living in a defiled world, and this is the time now that Yahweh is calling His people out of that. And He's setting up these cities of refuge for us to come out of that defilement and be protected in His camp, and He doesn't want a mixed multitude in His camp, because then we might as well stay in the world, because it's going to be worse than before and we'll be just defiled. We have to be around people that are fervent and loving and surrendering their lives to Yahweh and not part of the mixed multitude. And that's clearly what he's saying here. The world is like Sodom and Gomorrah in the days of Noah. It's immoral, it's wicked, it's Laodicean, it's rebellious. We must separate from the mixed multitude, or you'll become one of them. Better to be few with the righteous than many with the mixed multitude. Like I say, it's like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Sure, you're going to find some good in that tree, but you're also going to find a lot of evil. Aren't we much better going to the tree of life, that there's only good? Why mix the good with the evil when you can have from the tree of life? Isaiah 52. Isaiah 52 in verse 11 and 12. And I read it before in the New Testament. They were quoting it. But this is coming from Isaiah. And it's actually to the people when they're fleeing Babylon. And look what it says. Isaiah 52:11. Turn, turn, go out from there. Touch not the unclean. Go out of her midst. Purify yourself, bearers of the vessel of Yahweh. For you shall not go out with haste, nor will you go by flight. For Yahweh is going before you, and the Elohim of Israel gathers you. So he's saying, turn, turn, go out from there, and don't touch the unclean thing. So as you're fleeing one place, you're not to go to another place and be defiled. You should be going to less defilement. And face it, there's no place on the earth that has no defilement, but you don't want to go from Babylon to a worse place. You know, like the Amish, say they were fleeing Babylon. Well, they have pretty sanctified communities, even in Babylon. They don't want to go to a worse place, a more worldly place. They wouldn't flee there to go to Paris, France, you know, or a place that's defiled like that. So again, there's many stops in the wilderness, and like I always say, when you leave Babylon, it really makes no difference where you go to. Just get out of there. That's your first stop. But then as you go to your second stop and your third stop and your fourth stop, every stop should be sanctifying you more and giving you less defilement. You shouldn't be going backward. And that's the thing that Yahweh hates. You know, there's a time for everybody to leave Babylon. There's not one time where everyone has to leave at one time. The one thing he does hate is that when you do leave Babylon, if you go back, he hates the fact of people going backward. Because then you're out of it. You're out of the system. You're out of the evilness and you're going right back to it. So in a world that's so wicked, we must recognize and actively be seeking to separate from the world, or like a tsunami, it's gonna just swallow you up. Leviticus 20 and verse 26, or 26:20 rather. It says, "And you shall be holy to me, for I am Yahweh, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to become mine. And you shall be holy to me, for I, Yahweh, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to become mine." So we are Yahweh's. He is holy. We need to be holy. I have one more scripture before we end here, and it's in Revelation 14, 4 and 5. And this is to the Philadelphian. This is to the 144,000. And what are their characteristics? Revelation 14, 4 and 5. And we'll be, it's really great to be going over these things in the Bible studies, right? As we're just going over Revelation 14, and here we are, we're talking about it again. And look what it says. Revelation 14, verse 4 and 5. "These are the ones who had not become defiled, for they are pure. These are the ones following the Lamb wherever he may go. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits to Yahweh and to the Lamb. And no decoy was found in their mouth, for they are unmarked before the throne of Yahweh." Why is no decoy found in their mouth? Because they're not on social media, they're not on Facebook, they're not surfing through the internet. They're following this book. They're following the book, and there's no decoy found in their mouth because they're unmarked before the throne of Yahweh. They're not marking themselves with the ways of the world. These are the true Philadelphians. These are the ones that are going to go in the kingdom. These are the first fruits before Yahweh. And if we want to be like them, we got to separate from the mixed multitude. You've got to put that clear line in your life. And like I said, even sometimes, you know, you hate to lose friends, or even if it's a family member. But when somebody makes a conscious decision to go the other way and go back to the world, there's a reason why, like I said, Yahweh talks about shunning in the Bible. And it's something as love to that person, because you're hoping that they're going to realize what they're doing is not right before Yahweh and turn back. But this is the Philadelphian template. You must leave the mixed multitude if we want to be in the camp of Yah. There's no mixed multitude in the 144,000. None. So out of this 144,000, every single one, it's not 143,999 and one mixed multitude. No, there's no mixed multitude in the 144,000 in the camp of Yah. The Amish do not intermarry with or unite with non-believers. They are very friendly, helpful people, but they keep a clear line to who they believe is a believer and who's part of the world. We must make sure there is no mixed multitude in our camp and that there are only committed, baptized brethren around us. The biggest reason Israel failed throughout history is because they were influenced by a mixed multitude who drew them away from the truth. The biggest problem I've dealt with in my 23 years as an elder in the congregation is dealing with the mixed multitude. Whether it's the feast, the Bible school, whether it's communities we try, anything that we've done, it was always the mixed multitude that caused the problem. Bad companionships ruin good habits. We must keep our camps clean of worldly people. We must serve Yahweh with all our hearts, our mind, and our strength. So, praise Yahweh. I pray that this message, although it's sobering and it's a sad message, that I pray that it will be enlightening for you and really help us to get a clearer focus to strengthen the camp of Yahweh, but to clearly see that there is no place in the camp of Yahweh for the mixed multitude. Yahweh bless. Shabbat Shalom.